Hello and welcome back to Mr. Caro Plays FM24. Today we're going to look at what to do if you are a new lower league manager and you want to make some transfers, you want to make some impact on your team from the off. You likely have little to no money, no scouts, that kind of thing that would kind of make your journey very easy if you like. But we're going to do it the hard way. Now, in this particular example, we've picked Clyde simply because I've managed this team in the past. It's going to give me I know where, and I know some good pointers to go by. Now, tip one, this is going to be a three-part tip, if you like. Free tips in this video, one for a better word. And if the first tip is, how do we get some money? So if we go back to our scouting, and we look in there and we skip past, so as a couple of tutorials, but we'll skip past that, go to finish at top here, and we look, we've got a transfer budget of 15,000, which is pretty good actually, to be fair. A lot of teams don't even have that. And a wage budget of 1,038. So 380, sorry. So that, this is actually not bad, to be fair. This is a pretty good example of a team in lower league. Perhaps in England, you perhaps have more money than this, but certainly in the non-league, perhaps in England, this would be kind of what you would expect to see. So if we go to our squad, and what I tend to do, unfortunately it's going to throw up some tutorials, but no, what I tend to do is I tend to look in and see what players we have in our team. So if we go to our players, and then we look into our team itself, and we're going to look and see, kind of get an idea of what players we've got. So if we click on Neil Perry, for example, we can see that he is pretty bad for a 37-year-old. He's got £200 per week on his wages. So he would be a player I would look to automatically see if we can sign. You can see there is teams that want him. Now, they're actually, ironically, teams of a higher league. However, he is someone who we could easily get rid of. Now, I would recommend in situations like this to just offer unspecified to see if you can get any money. Typically you won't. His value is 0, so I'd imagine you'll get 0 for him. However, obviously by doing that, if we get an offer for him, we're not going to skip ahead to find out if we do, but I'm pretty confident you will, especially if it's a wanted player. If you do skip ahead, and you can also go through, don't forget, if you right click, you can go to transfer and you can offer higher and intermediate there, and we can go there, and it probably in a lot of cases it will offer, maybe not at this level. I wondered because it said wanted if they would indeed offer that. It didn't, which is okay, not the end of the world. You can see that he would perhaps get an offer and you'd be making yourself some money. Let's look at another player, Peter Grant. If we go to him again, he is a player, 29 years old, £150 per week on wages. He's fringe player. If we go to our reports and we look in there, you can see that he is not rated very highly at all. Another player we could perhaps try and sell. No magic cure to selling players. Either they'll go or they won't, right? And what I found is that a lot of players will go, especially if you're not offering a lot of money. Now, it is worth pointing out that certainly in the lower leagues, sometimes you just have to offload these players. You're not going to get major wages for them or major fees for them. That's okay. Really, the tip that I'm trying to put across here is spending money on players in the lower league is a dream, right? It's a dream, but not the reality. The reality is we're trying to get those free agents, we're trying to get those free transfers to build our squad from that kind of ethos, okay? Now, if we look at our scouting in this team, for example, and this is quite normal from a non-league team, skip ahead tutorials again. If we get no scouts at all. So obviously, first of all, we'd have to build up our scouting team. However, if you don't have the ability to do that for whatever reason, you can't afford it, there's no scouts available, they're all kind of rubbish, we can draw from a few other sections in here. And if we go to our transfers and we go to our director of football, regardless if there is a director of football, this seems to work. I don't know who it pulls up. It probably tells you what the alternative is in this particular occasion if there isn't a director of football. But if we so wanted a striker, we could perhaps pick our role, for example. Maybe we want a pressing forward, and then we want to pick our free transfer option in there, or loan or transfer, depending on your situation. End of season, end of contract could even work. And then quite often it will bring up a set of players. Now, the interesting thing here, and this is why this is important or can be important, is that we don't have any scouts. We have no ability to scout players ourselves, not efficiently. We don't have any scouts. So director of football is like a free tool, if you like, to be able to find a couple of players. And what I would recommend doing, you often find players you've heard of. Like I know he used to play for Norwich, for example, more recently. And his stats are pretty poor, but you got to remember we're in a pretty, the league that we're in, the stats aren't necessarily fantastic. And I would just get him on trial and see where we stand. Now, the reason why we do that is because if we try to give them the wages, often you can overpay. Sometimes even if you go on get a player on trial, the wages do drop down as well. So it is worth doing that, getting an idea of what they cost. negotiate out. If you get it rejected, cancel the trial. You can go back and then you can offer it again. Typically, if you cancel a trial, 9 times out of 10 it then lets you offer the player a contract again. Now the advantage of this is if you wanted to, you could go quite cocky and quite optimistic in your ambition to sign that player originally, and then get a bit more realistic once they've rejected that and you've had to terminate their trial. Then maybe be a bit more realistic with the amount of money that you're offering for that player to try and secure that deal. Now, another tip we can do is obviously going into our scouting, if you had scouted players, you could go into scouted players. There are usually some in here, which is always weird given that you haven't actually scouted anyone at this stage. However, there are some players within this stage, I guess, perhaps because it's done a little bit of simming in between you picking up the save, so to speak. There are no one good in this, but sometimes there can be, right? Sometimes we can find players within this. Obviously, this will build up over a period of time. If we go to our players again and we go players in range, and then this time we're going to go for new search, and then in here, and this is the important bit, we're going to go for our contract status unattached. Now, what I would always recommend in here, if I'm honest, is we obviously got that in there, and you're going to find that this is a massive list, 429 players. Now, perhaps you want to bring down the age. Maybe you want to keep your team under 25 or under 25 in there. You can see that automatically that players have decreased. They're down to 271 players right in there. The next thing we can have a look at in here, and this is kind of crucial in some leagues, if I'm honest, is we can perhaps put in transfer, and then you got chance of work permit. Now, I have touched on this in previous videos, but we didn't focus on non-league, especially in England. In the UK, this is a very important feature, simply because you do find that players will constantly get their work permits rejected, and you have no ability to really appeal. You can appeal. It is worth pointing out that work permits, I believe, do cost money on this game. So you don't want to apply for a work permit willy-nilly for players that have realistically got no chance of signing. People could put in the comments. I believe that is the case on this game. I could be wrong, but I think I have seen that. Maybe not in every country, but I think I have seen that it does indeed cost to apply for a work permit. So if you're just going for like a Canadian player, for example, you're unlikely to get that player unless he's got a dual nationality with a British player, or he's played in the UK for it and he's a homegrown player. I would say that you're unlikely, even then, perhaps a homegrown player is still unlikely to get that work permit over the line. But if you go into chance and we got put permit likely, ironically, then it completely kills your list. But if we go to exempt, for example, it's going to bring up apparently nobody. If we bring up work permit likely, it apparently only brings up 2 players, which seems incredibly unlikely. But I guess they're foreign players, and there's a couple of players within there that is bringing up, and actually they're not terrible players. So again, if we go to our trial and we go to and offer him a trial, for example, scroll through the future, you'd find that player maybe turns out to be a pretty good player within that. You can also play around with, obviously, the likelihood of trying to sign a player. Don't forget that it tends to put it on interested, but you can move that around to make that doubtful, for example. And actually, you can still get players even if they are doubtful that they will come to the club. So if we get rid of our work permit again in here, I'm surprised that it was the way it was, actually, to be fair in there, but that does seem to be the case. Work permit required, I guess you could put in there as well. And this would put yes, and there's 14 players that come up there. Now, it is worth pointing out that your scouting range is going to have a high impact on this, okay? It is simply because your scouting range is, in this particular case, League 2 in Scotland, which doesn't mean all those players are going to be the League 2 in Scotland. Like, for example, some of these players will never have played in Scotland. They'll just be, well, this player particularly has, but some of them won't be there. Some will not be based in Scotland. A lot of them are. So some of them just seem to appear in there for whatever reason. I don't understand why entirely. People will say that it is just Scottish players, perhaps, but I can pretty much certainly say without a doubt that sometimes it isn't, although the first 2 examples I clicked on were indeed Scottish players. For whatever reason, sometimes maybe they'll be randomly based there for no apparent reason. You can get quite a lot of players that way as well. Now, it is worth pointing out that often in this league, I don't know if we'll find someone, it's going to be hard for us to pull that information. Maybe this would be a good example if he's only 20 years old. Sometimes you can even get them to go non-contract. Now, he's not going to do that. But yeah, you can get them to go non-contract. If you were to go, for example, breakthrough talent prospect and go in here, if he did indeed accept that, which he's not going to, sometimes you can offer a non-contract player. Now, usually that's a younger player, but a lot of the time it doesn't work. And usually, to be honest, that does work a lot in your lower leagues, in non-leagues in the England or the UK, England yet, but not necessarily work so well in other leagues. But I have seen it in Scotland. For my Clyde team that I'm playing in my career save, I was able to offer non-contract players, but it didn't always make logical sense who they were offering it to, if I'm honest. It wasn't like a certainty that this player would not get a non-contract option, and other players seemingly that you'd thought you'd have to offer contracts to did indeed have the non-contract on there. Now, obviously, with the non-contract element, it is worth pointing out that is both good and also bad to some extent. You don't have to pay the player per week. Often it's per game or whatever, and there's some bonus involved there. It's also worth pointing out if that player does incredibly well, they are very likely to get poached simply because they are not contracted players, hence the non-contract player element. Now, it doesn't mean that doesn't work. It's a good method to save some money, especially if you've got not a lot of funds available at your time. Maybe get that player on a non-contract, maybe then upgrade him to a full contract at a later date. So it is a way of testing out players, perhaps. Like I say, a lot of players won't go for that. If I had a good example of a player that I would show you, but it is worth pointing out that some will. And often it is worth a try. You never know. Sometimes you think, there's absolutely no way this player is going to do that. And then they do. And then you get that player and away you go. And even then, sometimes I don't know if it's a glitch in the game. I have known it even when it says a non-contract player and you offer them a full-time deal. Sometimes you can get them on literally no money at all. I think I've signed non-contract players for like £5 per week. Now, again, no examples to give, unfortunately, which is perhaps a very bad way. You probably shouldn't say it if I haven't got any examples to give. However, it does work, and it is an interesting way. And some will say it's cheating the game. Some will say it's not how the game was intended. However, don't forget the word is, this is a game. Essentially we are playing a game, a football simulation, granted, but it nevertheless is a game. And the virtue and brilliance of that sentence is we can do as we please within the parameters of the game that we have. So if that means underplaying players, they're not real life, it doesn't matter. Feel free to do so and not worry about it. Obviously, like we've gone through in the past, I've done a few transfer videos. If you do have clauses, this is the time to have a look and see if they're worth using or cashing out. In this particular case, they are not, because there are none in there. It's pretty typical of a team like this. Sometimes the sort of Premier League teams or Championship teams, there are some good clauses in there. Obviously, you got your semi-professional element there, which is why the non-contract can be offered. It is worth pointing out that if you do suddenly turn professional, you obviously will have to pay those players, get them on better deals, get them on full contracts. That is something to keep in mind at a later date. Interesting with those kits, by the way, they're really a color clash. Why would they choose one kit like that and then another kit which was basically the same color? And I kid you not, playing during the season, that is very confusing. Hey, I didn't even realize till now, but that is a very confusing first kit and second kit there, but that's by the by. Anyway, going back to the video in hand, like I say, really, if you're building a squad, couple of final pointers to put across. You don't need a squad that's going to last you forever. If that means signing some older players, that is fine. Save your money, save your money on transfers, spend it on wages. Sometimes you have to speculate, sometimes you have to speculate to actually succeed. Sometimes you have to spend more than your wage budget to get there. But then obviously you're going to maybe sell a player or make some money back or whatever that be. Sometimes you have to just accept that when you go to your finance section, you're going to be projected to make a loss. Now, we probably already are projected to make a loss, but sometimes you're going to add to that. You're going to make it worse. And just accept that. It is what it is. We are spending money because we want to get promoted. If we get it promoted, then we're going to make more money. Everything is going to be golden in the end. Now, we might have a bit of a struggle to get there, but it will be golden in the end. Just remember, this is a game. This is not real life. You do not have to worry about meeting. I know that in some leagues there are financial clauses, etc., but not really at this lower league. It's really more of a case of not getting yourself in crazy debt, but not worrying about it too much. Now, if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. Hit the notification button to see when videos are released. Thank you and goodbye.